Good morning. Almost.
Second, to make the softwood lumber industry more competitive for the long term, we will provide an additional $500 million, largely in grants and contributions to supercharge new product development and new market diversification. Products such as reinforced timber and low-carbon wood fiber-based insulation materials that are used in prefabricated and modular housing. These investments will increase domestic processing and value added, particularly as technology changes the way we build. This new funding will include initiatives to support Indigenous-led forestry business development and diversification, something that Gorman has stood behind for decades. Third,
low carbon insulation? What the hell is that? What is he talking about? Indigenous-led? We already know he's selling out to First Nations in many respects, to this planning process. This should be Canada-wide, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of race. This should not be race-based at all. We'll be back with more. And how is Mark Carney profiting from this decision to subsidize the softwood industry? We'll be back with more. This is too much to believe.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please like the show and please subscribe. We appreciate you bearing with us yesterday on that show. There were some difficult topics to discuss, but you bore with us and you supported that show. And thank you. Please subscribe in large numbers today. Please do what you can to help the show move forward, because we're doing the job we need to do. And I appreciate that. So we just heard Mark Carney talk about possibly billions of dollars of subsidies. And before he mentioned that, he talked about guaranteed loans, which is sort of like a subsidy, isn't it? So what is that going to do? Why do we need massive subsidization of the softwood industry? Where is it going to go next? Did you know? And a lot of you have already commented about Mark Carney's stock interests in the United States. Is he actually going to benefit from a trade war that hurts Canada? This is a question we have, because he's doing nothing at all to stop the trade war. He's doing nothing to help softwood lumber, except, once again, the government trying to take it over. Mark Carney trying to take it over. And that is Mark Carney's response to everything. We'll do it for you. And so instead of negotiating with Donald Trump, which he refuses to do, he'd rather go to gay pride parades than negotiate with Donald Trump. We're in a situation now where Mark Carney clearly, and this is fascinating, and I have to thank my friend Mark Nixon, who, of course, has been a guest on this show. Mark Nixon is the most conflicted prime minister in Canadian history. Did Mark Carney recuse himself from his $1.2 billion softwood lumber subsidy? Yes, Brookfield has a significant involvement in Canada's softwood lumber industry. They own or manage large areas of timberland, particularly in British Columbia, where he was, of course, yesterday in Kelowna. You see all those people lined up behind him again at the firing squad photograph. How embarrassing for workers. And of course, wearing their hard hats as usual, looking like they're really, really behind Mark Carney. They might literally be forced to stand behind him, but are they behind him? Brookfield Asset Management. They own or manage large areas of timberland, particularly in British Columbia, and are involved in logging and lumber production. Brookfield's timber operations include Island Timberlands Limited Partnership in Canada and Longview Timber Holdings Corp in the U.S. Brookfield's involvement in the Canadian softwood lumber industry includes timberland ownership. Here it goes. Brookfield Timberland owns a substantial amount of forest land in Canada, making them one of North America's largest log exporters. Conflict of interest Carney. Marxist Carney. Here we go. It rings so true. Now, if you looked at the thumbnail of this broadcast, is truth and lies. But Mark Carney is telling us lies. He's not telling us the whole truth. And this is fascinating. If you watch Mark Carney struggle through this.
Good morning, almost good afternoon, Prime Minister Carney.
Thank you.
My name is Claudia Van Emmerich. I'm with Global News. My question for you is that the Trump administration has increased the general tariff rate as well as double tariffs on steel and aluminum, yet your government has not retaliated. How do you justify to Canadians who have voted you in to be elbows up against Trump that your government has not fired back, that you have not retaliated? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think the first thing to recognize is, and I said this in my remarks, but I'm going to repeat for emphasis, which is that 85% of the trade between Canada and the United States is tariff-free. That's our exports to the United States, that's U.S. exports to Canada. And we recognize that. We recognize very much the United States reaffirmation of this core element of CUSMA, or what they would call USMCA. So it's important to preserve that. It's important to reinforce that. And part of our discussions is about that. We are also...
Why is Mark Carney not even appear to be completely worried about the situation? 85% not affected. Don't worry. It's not a problem. I don't need to do anything except to go to gay pride parades. There's something that smells about all of this, and everything Mark Carney's involved with has that stench, that odor about it, that odor of corruption. There's something wrong here. Now, there are conflicting claims that Brookfield is maybe just managing it. But of course, in this corporate world, in this maze that Mark Carney's involved with, this globalist maze, if you look at Mark Carney's business interests, the tentacles reach into the WAF. They reach into various green energy corporations. They reach into multitude of U.S. and international corporations. So don't tell me management just means hands off and not direct ownership. There's something clearly amiss here. And Mark Carney seems, as usual, completely nonplussed by all of this.
Very cognizant that in about 9 months from now, the first review of USMCA, CUSMA as we call it, will begin.
By the way, are you tired of hearing CUSMA? Where the hell did that come from? It's the USMCA, has been since the treaty was ratified. I'm sick of hearing CUSMA from all of these Canadian trade representatives. What does that mean? Is that how Carney puts Canada first or Canada strong? Is that how Team Canada is Team Canada? Because they use a different abbreviation, a different acronym than the U.S. does?
Between the three parties. So there's a bigger picture there. The third thing, just from context, is we've always said that we will apply tariffs where they had the maximum impact in the United States and a minimum impact in Canada. And so we don't automatically adjust. We look at what we can do for our industry that's most effective. In some cases, that will be to remove tariffs. We have removed some tariffs over time so that, for example, the auto industry can function more effectively. And we'll look at opportunities to do so, because in the end, we're looking at having the best impact in Canada. The last point, if I may, which is what today is very much about, is we're focused on a positive agenda of building forward for our major industries, those most affected. The softwood lumber industry, clearly, steel, aluminum, other industries as well. And that agenda starts at home, being our own best customer. It goes to big investments in improving our competitiveness, upskilling, helping our workers improve their skills, and it's also diversifying trade.
Next question, CBC.
Hi, Prime Minister Carney. Brady Strachan, CBC Kelowna. Have you spoken to Donald Trump in recent days, and will you retaliate with more counter tariffs, including on American steel, or countermeasures or lift countermeasures already in place?
Thank you for the question. I haven't spoken to the president in recent days. We'll speak when it makes sense. We with respect to steel specifically, we announced a comprehensive.
Even the CBC seems to be cognizant of the fact that Mark Carney is either refusing to speak to Donald Trump, or Donald Trump is not answering his phone calls or picking up the phone when he calls. Even the CBC acknowledges that. What is Mark Carney's response here? What sort of blather is this? We'll talk to Donald Trump when it makes sense. It doesn't make sense today, but it made sense to make your announcement about recognizing the two-state solution in the Middle East, to recognizing an independent Palestinian state 2 days, literally 2 days before Donald Trump came down with his decision on tariffs on August 1st. Badly timed, Mr. Carney. And it made sense to go to a gay pride parade on Sunday and to have a picture taken with a half-naked individual that went around the world thanks to a wire service. And of course was seen by Donald Trump, who probably was shaking his head saying, what kind of a clown is running Canada? And why am I forced to deal with this clown? And of course, he's known this clown for many years, but perhaps Donald Trump wasn't aware of how woke and how DEI conscious Mark Carney is. Probably not, because it depends upon which Mark Carney Donald Trump was dealing with at the time. There are, as I've said, at least 3 different versions of Mark Carney.
Approach on steel 2 weeks ago, which included significant support for repositioning, significant support for Buy Canadian, and with respect to, if I can draw some distinctions, with respect to softwood lumber, obviously the core of the demand domestically, not all of it, but the core of the demand, or much of the increase in demand, can be through our new approach to home building in this country. With steel, the defense procurement comes into play. The broader infrastructure investments is part of our building national projects of national significance, and the requirements we'll have around those. So we had those elements there, plus some industry repositioning. So we feel, look, it's a challenging position. We have put in place a series of measures, and I would add one other thing, which I think is it's relevant. I know it's relevant for Canada, but I would submit that it's very relevant for the United States. We've also put in place the toughest measures against foreign steel that could be dumped into Canada or transshipped through Canada to other markets. So again, I just wrap that into the broader discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your, once again, vacuous rhetoric. Here's the lesson to learn, my good listeners, my viewers. Whatever happens to Canada, Mark Carney wins. That's the lesson we have to understand here. This is why Mark Carney's not engaged at all in this trade war. He doesn't really care, because in the end, Mark Carney will benefit. Canada might be on the floor. We might be on the mat, like in a boxing match, but Mark Carney always wins. Because remember what Pierre Poilievre said of Mark Carney during the election campaign. He's an international globalist grifter who uses his political positions, his appointed political positions, all appointed in the past, running as a member of parliament and running for the leadership of the Liberal Party. The first time Mark Carney ever ran in a Democratic race. He was always appointed to other positions, but he used those positions to promote his own interests. He's always done that. And of course, here he is. And I have to laugh. He's standing next to his natural resources minister, Hodgson, who, if you put a pork pie hat on the man, would bear a stunning resemblance to Sam Giancana. And it can't seem to do a news conference without those sunglasses on. I wonder why. Something going on there. But a lot of you thought I was a bit hard on Pierre Poilievre yesterday, because I didn't think he quite answered the question about Alberta independence the way he could have. And I think it's what he didn't say, as much as what he did say, that mattered. So, as I say, if you watch the show, you know I will be critical of all politicians, conservative or liberal, communist or fascist. I will criticize any politician because I am not in anybody's pocket. I am a principled conservative libertarian, I believe in limited government. I believe in free speech, free assembly, freedom of religion, all the things our Constitution is supposed to grant us, and believe it or not, private property as well. But I will always criticize a politician if I think they're on the wrong track. Because as I say, keep affirming a politician when they're wrong, they become a megalomaniac because they're never far from it to begin with. And I've worked in politics my entire adult life in one form or another, either as a journalist, as a public affairs officer, or as a communications guy on Parliament Hill. So I know politicians, and I know you can't affirm them when they're wrong because they will keep saying the wrong things and they don't know when they're wrong. This is why it's up to honest journalists and the public to point it out. But I think Poilievre was right on about softwood lumber. And here's his latest video, which I caught early this morning when I was up at 5. And I said, yeah, I'm going to say good for you, Pierre Poilievre. You've done it right in this case. And this is why I say he's telling the truth about this. Mark Carney can't tell you the truth to save his life.
Our hearts are today with the workers in the forestry sector. Our loggers, our mill workers, and the many towns that rely on them are obviously suffering after 10 years of unfair tariffs on our workers. Tariffs that have doubled under Mark Carney, tariffs that have been applied by 3 U.S. presidents over a decade of liberal diplomatic failures. To be clear, these tariffs are wrong and unjustifiable. That's precisely why Stephen Harper was so successful at eliminating them in just 80 days as Prime Minister. He even got them refunded. Yet, Mark Carney has been Prime Minister for over 140 days, and still the tariffs are there and rising. The Liberals have been in power for a decade with 3 presidents, and the tariffs are only growing. Mark Carney promised us that he would put elbows up, that he would handle Trump, and that he would negotiate a win.
You all remember that. Remember, elbows up? I can deal with Donald Trump. Pierre Poilievre can't. Because I'm the tough guy, Mark Carney said. I've been there. I'm the banker. Remember, I was the governor of the Bank of England. I can stand up to Donald Trump. So far, Mark Carney's done nothing except get on his knees, prostrate, and worship Donald Trump every time he's in his presence. The man is just reeking of hypocrisy and reeking of absolute pusillanimous, pathetic behavior. He's a weakling. I think Poilievre is tougher in every aspect.
By ending the tariffs, he's broken all of those promises. And we know President Trump is someone that nobody can control, but that's why it was wrong for Mr. Carney to promise that he could do so. Ever since Mark Carney became Prime Minister, there have been more tariffs and rising tariffs, contrary to Mr. Carney's own promises. Again, contrary to his promise, under Mark Carney's leadership, it has been elbows down and tariffs up. Today, he offers only more debt to forestry companies as they are hemorrhaging money and jobs, which are heading south of the border.
And this is why Poilievre is speaking the truth here. Subsidize the logging industry, and it's going to go under because it's going to be dependent upon government debt. And this country is so far in debt, so many trillions of dollars in debt, that we are very close to economic catastrophe. There should not have to be a lifeline for logging. It's a viable, vibrant industry. I grew up in British Columbia. The logging industry was integral to that province's economy. And it was a thriving industry that didn't need government handouts. And loggers don't want government handouts or welfare. They want to do their job. And logging companies want to do it too. So, Carney, get off of your behind, start negotiating, and get some answers. Because as Poilievre pointed out, how come Stephen Harper was able to do this? Huh? And Carney, you're the international banker who knows how the world works. Do something about it.
And we see workers in forestry towns across the country worried they're going to lose their jobs. Conservatives will fight for Canada. We'll put our country first. We've offered Prime Minister Carney to work with him in order to secure a real deal, and that offer remains open. In the meantime, we're pushing for lower taxes on work, investment, home building, and, of course, energy. By cutting taxes on home building, we can create more domestic demand for our lumber that will create jobs for our workers and houses for our youth. We propose eliminating red tape to build more and strengthen our extremely weak economy. And we pledge to work with all parties to achieve all of this. Unfortunately, Mr. Carney is not living up to the many bold promises that he made, that he was going to handle Trump, negotiate a win, and put his elbows up. But we will put aside his failures and offer to work with anybody in order to put Canada first. Our goal is to protect the jobs of workers, the prices of our consumers, and to make our economy strong, self-reliant, and sovereign. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think he's dead on with these words. Carney has failed. I've been saying that for days, but it's almost as if he wants to fail. And I've decided that he does want to fail because he's not for Canada strong. He's for Mark Carney strong. And this is why he's put Dominic LeBlanc, he's put cabinet ministers in charge of this who really are so detached from it. They don't even seem to realize the gravity of the situation. So, we have a bunch of Liberal cabinet ministers essentially chit-chatting with their American counterparts and getting absolutely nowhere. And this is where Mark Carney wants them to get nowhere. Because, as I said, he benefits from this. And by the way, I say at this time, please share this broadcast with your friends and family. YouTube is putting their thumb on this broadcast again. We're not going to let them do that, are we? No, we're going to fight back. And wanted to show you this because Sean Feucht will be on this show tomorrow. I'm interviewing Sean this afternoon, and that interview will be broadcast tomorrow or Friday, depending upon whether or not Naomi Wolf comes on the show tomorrow. I'm still waiting to hear back from Naomi this afternoon, but I really anticipate we'll have Sean's interview on tomorrow. I'm going to ask him all the questions that you want to know about what happened to him in Canada. What was his reaction? How did he feel when a car rammed his bus? How did he feel when a church in Montreal got fined for hosting him? How did he feel when mayors and civic leaders across Canada tried to cancel him? So he's back on August 21st in Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, August 22nd, Alberta at the legislature. He's in Kelowna on August 23rd. And on August 24th, I think that's Abbotsford. But whoever put this together for me didn't. Anyway, that is Sean Feucht's schedule. I love this. Rebel News, leave it to Rebel News. Rebel News is offering a bounty for the Antifa thug who threw a smoke bomb at Sean Feucht while he was in Montreal. That's beautiful. Rebel News will reward $1,000 to the first person who provides information that leads to an arrest. Yes. And by the way, I will provide a free hat to the next person who sends in a picture of themselves with my merchandise. And we still haven't got that second person. I mean, come on, guys. You're making me feel insignificant here. Let's please try to. Please try to do that. We really would appreciate it. Anyway, that is where we are with that. And I think that's, yeah. And there I go, Brookfield. There's evidence of this, and it's just incredible. So I want to move now in the last, and like I say, keep sharing this broadcast with your friends and family. It's so important. If I asked you what today is, would you know? 80 years ago, the Enola Gay B-29 dropped the first atomic bomb on human beings. It, of course, had been tested in the desert as part of the Manhattan Project. The United States knew the bomb worked. They used it against Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. The pilot of that aircraft was Lieutenant Colonel Paul Tibbets, and he went to his grave saying he had no qualms about dropping that bomb, as horrific as he described the destruction. And U.S. President Harry Truman had a very difficult decision to make, and I appreciate it was a difficult decision to make. And we're still debating whether that was the right decision or not to make, depending upon whether you feel the atomic bomb should never have been used or it was justified in being used because there would have been huge casualties and fatalities in an invasion of the Japanese mainland. So I acknowledge that debate continues. I was firmly on the side of using the bomb for most of my life. At this time of my life, I'm vacillating somewhat, and I'll tell you why. Because we seem to be moving closer and closer to potential nuclear war, because people seem to have forgotten how dangerous and how catastrophic a nuclear war will be if it ever occurs. And the Cold War, there seemed to be an intelligence among global leadership that this was not a viable or feasible thing to do. You just couldn't have a nuclear war. And there were many instances over that period from 1945 to 1990. You know, that essentially, that 45-year period, where there were nuclear accidents that could have developed into the semblance of a nuclear first strike and could have invited retaliatory measures. Thank God that never happened. And thank God we had presidents like John F. Kennedy, who understood the Cuban Missile Crisis was something he had to solve, but he had to solve it without engaging in a nuclear war, that there was a third way. There was another way out of that situation. And you have to remember, in the 1950s, people seemed to think it was just okay to test nuclear bombs. I always laugh about this because the U.S. Air Force used to drop nuclear bombs on test ranges in Nevada, not far from Las Vegas. And they filmed movies around some of these blast sites. And interestingly enough, a lot of the cast perished eventually of, shall we say, diseases related to nuclear radiation. But there was almost an acceptance that it was okay to test the bombs, but just don't have a war. And I have to laugh because, I'm deviating from my usual politics here into my music side. But it was even celebrated. Nuclear bombs were celebrated because they kept the peace in some respect, as long as you didn't use them. As long as you just said, hey, we've got this many bombs and you've got that many bombs, and if you attack us, we'll attack you. So mutually assured destruction, MAD, did work. As long as you realized you couldn't go past the next step. Unfortunately, today in the post-Cold War world, it doesn't seem to be that understandable to a lot of politicians. But here's a great album, by the way. This is Count Basie, the complete Atomic Basie album. And there, we've got a mushroom cloud right on the front cover of this album. Great album, by the way. This is 1957. This is when Basie was undergoing a real, renaissance in his music. He was on the verge of doing some recording with Frank Sinatra. He was having a hell of a time as a big band leader in the rock and roll era. And he was extremely popular, ironically, in Las Vegas, not far from where they were actually doing atomic testing like this. So this is a great album. If you have a chance to listen to it, it's marvelous. They've got one of the best arrangements I've ever heard of From Russia with Love. So it's a real Cold War album. But it's wonderful. I grew up in the Cold War. I grew up on Comox, British Columbia. We had CF 101 Voodoo's stationed there. They were at times carrying Genie nuclear weapons. because we had nuclear weapons at that base. They were owned by the United States Air Force, but we were storing them, and we were going to use them in the event that Canada or Alaska was attacked by Russian Soviet forces. So we grew up with the knowledge that this could all end overnight, but that we had politicians who at least seemed to be sane enough to realize it probably wasn't a good idea to have a nuclear war. Well, right now, I don't know if you know that, there's a nuclear clock, a nuclear war clock, and it's literally 30 seconds to midnight. It's closer than it's ever been, even closer than during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which, of course, everybody always says was the apex of the Cold War. Never got worse. After that, there was a gradual lessening of tensions. The nuclear test ban treaty was signed by Khrushchev and Kennedy. Then during the Brezhnev years, there was détente with President Richard Nixon, and things gradually declined in terms of the rigidity of both sides and the potential for both sides to fight. And then, of course, the Cold War ended in 1990, 1991, with the implosion of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the Warsaw Pact. But when the Warsaw Pact collapsed, NATO should have shut its doors too. I didn't realize that at the time because I thought, well, let's find a new mission for NATO. And I was served with NATO in the former Yugoslavia. And I was writing the talking points about why NATO was still viable, why we needed NATO, why NATO was still a great organization. It was going to save Europe from itself. This was even before we reinvented Russia as the enemy of the earth. But I wrote the talking points. I understood exactly what we were trying to do. Reinvent the organization so all of those people who were dependent upon it, who got their salaries from it, and all of the military industrial establishment that made billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars off the armaments trade, that wanted the wars to continue, wanted the wars around the world to keep on going because they were financing them, they were providing the weapons, and NATO was providing the opportunity. This is where we are today, viewers. NATO has become an encumbrance to world peace. NATO is provoking the potential conflict in Ukraine with Russia. We have idiots like Herr Keir Starmer saying, let's go to war with Russia. The UK has a military that's literally, no, not literally, is a shadow of its former greatness. The Royal Navy is nothing but a shadow of what it used to be. It has more admirals than warships. The British Army has more horses than tanks. The British Air Force cannot operate half of its jets because they're in repair, much like we do in Canada. So that's the state of the UK's military. France is no different. France can, and we have President Emmanuel Macron of France saying, we're going to fight Russia over Ukraine. France would be defeated in a matter of days. This is all insanity because it has the potential to rise to nuclear conflict. And we have to say no. On this 80th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, we have to say enough of the insanity. And let's return to a healthy fear of nuclear war, a healthy understanding that this is something that's not feasible, that's not viable, that's not winnable, and will mean destruction for all of us. But that's why I love to listen to Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Do I agree with everything Jeffrey Sachs says? No. But when he talks about the need to recognize reality in Ukraine, I really like what Jeffrey Sachs has to say.
Nobody speaks the truth. No one says that this completely erratic and dangerous behavior is very damaging to our national security. We had the president shooting off about nuclear this and that in the last few days. Just unbelievable.
Here's what he said, and this is in response to a tweet.
And I should add, this segment is from Judge Napolitano's show, Judging Freedom, which I watch faithfully. He used to, of course, be the official judge guy or the official legal analyst on Fox News for years until he fell out of grace for for a couple of things he reported. And now he's got one of the best foreign policy shows on the internet. You can catch him 4 or 5 times a day on YouTube and Rumble.
Based on the highly provocative statements of the former president, Chris, can you put it up? Based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Talk about being foolish with words. Why would you do this? And why would you announce it? And why would you provoke another nuclear power that has 3 or 4 times the number of nuclear submarines that we do?
And the reason that this unbelievable posting occurred was in response to a posting by Medvedev, which was in response to an ultimatum delivered by Trump to President Putin that if you don't have a ceasefire in 10 days, I impose the sanctions on all countries in the world that are dealing with you. Ultimatum to Russia rather than actual diplomacy. Good luck with that. Ultimatum, an ultimatum. You know, the problem is Trump is, of course, he has no attention span, maybe no understanding, no knowledge of what he's doing. But the fact of the matter is there's no diplomacy taking place right now because the war in Ukraine that he promised to end in 24 hours, which, by the way, could have been ended in 24 hours, not on the basis of an ultimatum or declaring you must have a ceasefire, but on the basis of solving the underlying issue that led us to this war. And this war, as every analyst you talk to says, and as everyone who has looked clearly into this understands, came because we pushed NATO up to Russia's borders, because we overthrew a government in Ukraine so that that new government would support NATO because the government we overthrew wanted neutrality, which is a no-no in American eyes, and because the United States resisted every attempt at diplomacy to avoid the war and then to end the war. We absolutely threw out the agreement at the UN called the Minsk II agreement that would have avoided this war, telling the Ukrainians, you don't have to abide by the UN Security Council and an agreement that the Ukraine itself had signed. And then when there was a peace agreement reached, just about to be reached in April 2022, the US government told the Ukrainians, no, you fight on. We don't want you neutral. We want you on our side. No neutrality. So Trump now gives an ultimatum that doesn't get to any of the root causes of this conflict. Of course, the ultimatum is not going to be observed, but he's giving an ultimatum to a nuclear superpower. But more than that, he's telling China, India, Brazil, and all the other countries of the world that the United States demands that they stop trading with Russia as well.
We're back in a minute with some concluding remarks. Here's a brief visit to our merchandise. Thanks for watching today. I want to add, pray that we get back to Donald Trump that we had when he was running for the president in 2024. The Donald Trump who wanted to end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. The Donald Trump who wanted an end to foreign wars. The Donald Trump who wanted to be the president of peace. Let's pray we get that president back, because that's the president so many of us, whether we could vote for him or not, so many of us supported and wanted to see as the next president of the United States, because he made a lot of sense. Let's pray we see that president again. And in this country, God, pray for the heart and soul of this country. Pray for a country that's so anti-Christian, it tries to cancel visiting pastors. Pray for a country that cares more about the cyberitic excesses of a gay pride parade than it does about churches and Christians, and even fighting tariffs. Pray for this country, because I think that's all we can do at this point. Thank you for joining me today. God bless all of you, and Godspeed to the work you're doing and to the work we're all trying to do as we resolve to resist and we fight for truth and justice in this country. They're not just old words that mean nothing. They do mean something. Thanks for being here today. I'll be back again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Be there. This has been David Krayden broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. Back again tomorrow.